What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Wing and Tail Boys podcast, your Northeast hunting and fishing destination. I'm Chris,
And I'm Angelo.
and we're your hosts. Join us as we navigate the woods and waters of the Northeast, sharing our passion for the outdoors.
Whether it's land management, outdoor recreation, hunting, or fishing, we're going to cover it all. With 40 plus years of experience in the Northeast, we'll provide insights, tips, and stories to help you make the most of your adventures and help you experience the wild.
So, tune in, grab your gear, and let's hit the woods together. And always remember, success is just a commitment away. What's going on, guys? Thanks for joining us here for another episode of the Wing and Tail Boys podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by the Nine Finger Chronicle himself, the CEO of the Sportsman's Empire Podcast Network, the Dan Johnson. And we cover so many awesome things. We start off the conversation by talking about how to balance being a parent and hunting at the same time. We then go into some of the lessons that he's learned over this past year, both from successes that he's had in the field and for what some people would consider failures in the field. And then we dive into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, which is land management practices, habitat control, and what he plans on doing on his property, what I plan on doing on my property, both in the short term and the long term. Now, before we break off into the episode, I want to share some awesome things with you that sometimes I tend to forget to mention either in the intro or the closing of the episodes. First and foremost, if any of you are in the New York State area and you're looking for some land management work, whether that be herbicide treatment, weed control, hack and squirt, give me a call, shoot me an email, wingandtail.chris@gmail.com. I am certified with the state of New York. I am licensed, I am insured, and I would love to help you bring your plan into reality. Next is the science of arrow flight that we have been recording. If you've been following this podcast network since the beginning, you know that about 2 months ago, give or take, myself and George of Fire Knock partnered up, and we've been recording this Science of Arrow Flight series. And essentially, our main goal is to simplify the science behind arrows, how they fly, why they behave the way they do. So that way, when you're making decisions on what arrow shaft you want, what components you want, how you want to build your arrow, you could build it with the knowledge of knowing what those choices, how those choices are going to impact your arrow in flight and at the point of impact. Next up, I'm so excited. I'm working on a website right now. I'm designing it myself. We're almost done, almost ready to launch it. I'm super, super excited because along with the launching of that website is going to become the offering of a product that I'm not quite ready to share with you guys yet. But keep an eye out for that. As soon as that website launches, I'll be sure to tell you guys about it. We're hoping to be able to offer some merchandise on there, the land management services, as well as these other products that I'm not ready to share with you yet. But keep an eye out for that stuff. That is coming hopefully very, very soon. Last but not least, I am so excited to finally be able to share with you the newest partner sponsor of the Wing and Tail Boys podcast and the Wing and Tail Outdoors Network, and it is Vitalize Seed. I reached out to Vitalize Seed with an issue that I was having. They told me that they were working on a product that could potentially deal with that issue that I was having, and they have finally release that into the public, and I'm ready to share that with you. If you are like me and you have a property somewhere where the growing season isn't all that long, or it takes a long time for the snow to finally go away and your soil to be able to plant, what that means for you, same thing for me, is you don't have a long enough growing season to grow a full summer planting and a full fall planting. It just doesn't work out. So what Vitalize Seed is offering and what I'm going to be running for them this year is their clover mix. And the beautiful thing about the clover mix is it's a cool season blend that could grow all the way through summer into fall. You still have those legumes coming up. You're still fixing that nitrogen. Of course, it's not going to be as great as, a true summer planting with your soybeans and all that other great stuff that you could plant, but it's still going to do the job. It's still going to do great. Vitalize Seed is also offering free shipping When you order your premium clover and chicory, that's a mixture of 5 perennial clovers and chicory, 6-pound bag for $49.99. If you want just the annual clover mix, that's 6 pounds, fast growing, easy to establish, and that is $39.99 plus free shipping. Get Vitalized Seed. Have the first green food source this spring with our new clover mixes. Guys, thanks again for joining us on the Wing and Tail Boys podcast, where success is always a commitment away. Enjoy today's episode. We'll catch you next week. Dan Johnson, happy to have you on the podcast, buddy. How you doing today?
Doing good, dude. Doing good. How is it over there on the East Coast, man?
Confusing, to be honest with you. It has been cold one day, hot the next. It can't make up its mind. It was like in the 50s last week. All the ice melted, and then all of a sudden we got hit with like teens again. And I left work this morning. I've been in bed since 11 o'clock today. I tried to go to work. I tried to make it through the day, and I was like, yeah, this isn't happening. Called down to the office.
You're sick?
But yeah, no, I feel like crap. But last night, like this weekend, I went down to Jersey. I went to go visit, my family and stuff. We got the baby on the way. The baby's due in like a month and a half. So we made our last rounds, and I think from this point forward, it would be very smart to stay closer to the birthing center.
That's right.
So we went into Jersey, and Saturday, Sunday, my throat was like bothering me a little bit, and I woke up in the middle of the night last night, like shaking like a leaf. It was awful. Tried to take some Dayquil, NyQuil. That didn't really work. Tried the work thing out. Got home and I was like, you know what? I'm all achy. Let me try some like Aleve or some nonsense. And that mixed with like the NyQuil or the Dayquil kind of did the trick good enough for me to come on here with you. So I'm happy. I'm happy I'm able to pull it.
You're just a concoction, a cocktail of over-the-counter medicine in your bloodstream right now.
Dude, you have no idea. I haven't been sick this many times in 1 year, and I can't even tell you how long. I don't know what it is. I thought moving out here to PA with like the cleaner air, I'd be like safe. Absolutely not. Yeah. So, what's going on with you, man? How are things over in Iowa?
I'll tell you what. Here's my last 48 hours. So, if anybody out there knows me or follows me or does knows anything about me, you probably hear me talk about how my daughter is a fairly good wrestler, and how
fairly good. Give her the credit she deserves. She's not fairly good. She's placing, right?
Yeah, she placed at state this weekend. So
okay.
There's women's wrestling right now is absolutely exploding in across the United States. So much so that in like outside, in girls sports throughout the years, especially in small town Iowa, basketball and maybe softball used to be the two main heavy hitter sports in the state of Iowa. And now something is happening where certain parts of the state, they can't even fill women's basketball teams because so many girls are going to wrestling now. And I think what you're starting to see is like this group of girls who wrestling isn't a sport like basketball. You kind of got to be tall and you got to kind of have some agility. Like if you're a bigger gal, like there's girls who are wrestling over 200 pounds, right? And so say what you want about that, but they're kids and they have a place now. Like there's no place for a body type for that in basketball, really. There's no place for a body type in track and field unless you're a shot putter or discus thrower. But in wrestling, there's no body types. There's no you can't, if you're tall, you can be good. If you're short, you can be good. If you're skinny, you can be good. If you're fat, you can be good. Right. And so there's this huge awakening right now, especially in the state of Iowa. Like we had a tournament this weekend where there was 1,600 girls throughout the state of Iowa that showed up.
That's awesome.
Yep. Across a whole bunch of different age brackets. And so my daughter has really been heavy into wrestling this year and last year. And last year she came up short of her goal, and that was to place at state. And this year she got 5th in the state of Iowa. And there are some absolute savages out there that are girls, like girls that are winning boys brackets and they're winning girls brackets. And like, obviously that a lot of that stuff might change when puberty hits and testosterone starts to take over for the boys and stuff like that. But there's girls out there that are savages, dude. And my daughter ran into a couple of those this weekend, but she wrestled hard and she wrestled back and she was able to place 5th in the state. And we're excited about that, man.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations to her.
Yeah,
She is one of
absolutely.
those savages, it seems like. So, that's a proud dad moment, I'm sure.
Yep,
Um,
we're pretty happy with that.
I would also argue that wrestling might be the one sport where short people like myself get to
Mm-hmm.
shine. So
Absolutely.
I enjoyed it. I dabbled a little bit when I was younger. Fall was kind of like my missing sport. I ran track and I ran winter track. I played baseball. I tried soccer for a little while. I tried wrestling for a little while. But that was before like I was going like hunting, like full time. Now fall's taken up by the whole hunting thing. Like, how do you work around that? How do you work around being a dad and a coach for a girl who's in like such an extensive fall sport?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like, usually I'm back. I'm done hunting by the time like practices have started, but tournaments haven't yet. So, I mean, you could go do tournaments all year round, and this year is going to be that step up, not only to folk style but to freestyle wrestling. And so we're going to be going throughout the summer. We're going to be training for freestyle now that folk style season is over, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with wrestling, but folk style for boys goes into college. Girls, when you're done wrestling high school, you go into college and you have to know freestyle. So now we have this whole group of girls learning freestyle, and now in order to go to college, they have to learn freestyle too. So folk style to freestyle, there's a transition there, new rules and things like that. And I think eventually what's going to happen is there's probably going to be a switch in the high school levels in Iowa to probably start going more into the freestyle world and less out of the folk style, even though one could argue folk style is a much more impressive form of wrestling than freestyle. Like, just having to escape, and some of the rules make it harder and things like that. So it's gonna, just like baseball, right? When we were kids, baseball was for like 8 weeks in the summertime, maybe, and then if you were good enough, you made an all-star team, and then you went and maybe did a tournament.
Yeah.
But now baseball's all year round, training year round. Wrestling is getting into the same thing. It's more money's involved, shit like that. And so we're just getting started, basically, is what I'm getting.
All right. No, that's awesome. And it's great as a future girl dad. It's really awesome to see girls having a place for themselves. Like, they can compete with the boys if they want, but they also have their own place to go and compete with the girls too. I think that's great with everything, especially with everything going on these days. And, we could kind of leave it at that, but it's really nice to, even amongst all of the bullshit that's going on today, like, you still see them coming out on top. And
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is now there's, so not a lot of colleges had girls college wrestling, but the NCAA, they just passed a law that makes women's wrestling the 91st championship sport of the NCAA. So that means that now, see, the University of Iowa was one of the first schools to get a collegiate wrestling program, amongst others, as far as a D1 school. Now Iowa State is going to have one. And then now that this rule is passed, by next year, I'm sure we're going to see Penn State have a women's program. I'm sure we're going to see Oklahoma State have a women's program, and all the major Big Ten schools and powerhouse wrestling schools like Cornell and, the list, Lehigh, all that stuff. You're going to start seeing women's programs from them popping up. And if your daughter is in wrestling right now, or just getting started wrestling right now, this opens the door for so many girls to get their college paid for through scholarships. You know what I mean? It's just,
sure.
It's a bananas event that's happening right now. So if you want your daughter to be good at something, get them in wrestling right now and train them right now. And because there's a possibility that there's no fee to go to college. It's a full ride.
Yeah. And I mean, who doesn't like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the explosion in girls in wrestling, do you think that has anything to do with like self-defense type stuff? Do you think there's any correlation between, girls being taught to protect themselves these days and the increasing number of girls in wrestling specifically?
Yeah. So I don't necessarily know if there's a correlation between, like, hey, like, I don't have my daughter in wrestling because I want her to know how to defend herself, right? it's something that is a byproduct of that for sure. But I'll tell you this right now, here's a couple things that wrestling will teach you, whether you're a boy or a girl. It teaches you how to stay calm in intense situations, right? Throughout the course. I don't know if you've ever been in a headlock so tight you can't breathe, but you have to stay focused, because if you don't stay focused, you don't know how to get out of some of those moves. So what that does is, I'll tell you what, I've been in a couple situations in my life where, because of my wrestling training, I was able to stay somewhat calm in those scenarios, knowing that if this does go south, I can probably take this dude down and just stop the fight or beat his ass, whatever I need to do. Right. So the good news is that I'm not worried about my daughter at her school. If, shit goes down, I feel like she's going to be able to protect herself very well in the school. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. And she's got, if I'm remembering correctly, 2 brothers also. So she's
2 little brothers, dude. I don't even want to talk about that. If she wants to, she'll snap them. She'll break them. Like, nobody messes with her when she's in the house. I don't even do it yet.
That's awesome. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go shoot my bow in the backyard. I'll be back in a little while. We'll give you time to calm down. Then we can revisit this.
Right.
So
right.
You had a pretty eventful season this year. I know you shot a deer in Kansas, right? I believe you whitetail deer, and I think you shot a blacktail also somewhere out west.
No, I shot a mule deer in South Dakota. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of highs, right? I know the Kansas one, you kind of held really close to your heart, because that was more of like a family thing, kind of reconnecting with old family at that point, which is awesome. I absolutely love that. And these days, I'm starting to relate to that more and more. My brother's got 2 kids. One's 8. One's turning 8 in April. The other one's turning 3 in July. So he doesn't exactly have the time to get out and spend in the woods like he used to. My uncle lives down the shore. Now I'm 3 hours away from him, who's really the guy who taught everyone in our family to hunt. My dad, he goes, he doesn't go. He'll wake up one day and be like, nah, I don't feel like going today. Or, he says he won't go. And the next thing you know, he's driving the Kubota, right by your stand, because he's trying to get to his tree.
He's just spooking deer for it. He's spooking deer so all the big bucks come back when he's there.
That is right. I mean, to be honest with you, I would prefer him ride in. Like that's one of those tactics I use. Like if I'm sitting in a stand and I know there's deer in the food plot and there's nothing I want to shoot, I'll give somebody a call and ask them to come pick me up in the buggy. Yeah. So at least that way it's the buggy scaring them off, and it's not me. And that actually worked in our favor this year. I went out Friday of the first week of deer season in New York, and I didn't really see anything, but I saw a lot of deer, but nothing I wanted to shoot. And then I asked my dad to come and pick me up. Same way, bump some deer out of the field, whatever. Next day, he got a shot at our number 1 hit list buck, which didn't work out very well. But at least the whole tactic thing worked out the way it should. I mean, only thing better would have been to get that shot. But I'm interested in some of the things that you've learned from this year. And the first question I'm going to ask is typically a basic one. I want to know what you've learned from a success that you've had this year. But more importantly, I want to know something that you've learned from what some may consider not a successful hunt or experience. What I mean is, like on my property, like I just mentioned, my dad missed the shot, but he had the shot. So there's things that we did well to make that happen. And to me, that was kind of a learning experience. What do you got for
me? I'm trying to
think. If you're anything like me, you love to customize your bow while always making sure everything is just spot on. That's why I trust Anthony and Chris over at Big D Custom Pro Shop. They're located on Route 15 in Lake Hopatcong, New Jersey, and they have everything you need to tune your bow. And I promise you're going to leave there with a smile on your face. So if you live in northern New Jersey, give my boy Big D a shout for all your archery needs. When I head out to the woods, I have to know that I have the best performing equipment that I can afford. So that way I'm the only variable that I have to worry about. That's why I trust Fire Knock products for all my arrow and bow accessory needs. From arrow components to bow accessories like stabilizers and arrow rests, they have what you need. Dorge won't put anything on the market if it doesn't perform 50% better than what's already out there. So head on over to fireknock.com today to see what they're all about.
I'll just kind of focus on the success. We'll end on a bad note, but we'll start with the success. Like, here's what I've learned about hunting, like, especially for my trips. This has been my 6th trip out to South Dakota. So it took me 6 years traveling to South Dakota to try to get within shooting range of a mule deer with a bow in the hills with no cover, right? There's no trees where I hunt. So it's grasslands, right? It's prairie. It's dances with wolves type of scenario we're in here. And these deer, it's hilarious how a 300-pound mule deer buck can just disappear into, antlers standing tall on his head. And you got to know what to look for. I mean, you like spotting scope, you just see a little pinky move and you got to be that good to locate these deer. Or for years, I just walked right by them, had no clue that where they were there. And I turn around and I'm seeing a big buck looking right at me, and then he hops away, right? Or, identifying how the terrain works, right? And so if I'm looking one direction and I just see all grass, I'm like, well, it's just a flat surface. You walk, I don't know, 100 yards down this slope and you look behind me and there's all these little cracks and all these little, doe heads popping up that were there the whole time. They just hide so well, and that, just generate, thousands of years of adapting to your environment, and they're really good at it. So it took me 6 years to become successful. And in that period of time, I just learned how to hunt mule deer. Really 6 years worth of getting close, wind shifts, I'm screwed. Getting close, I break a twig, I lose. And just years of that, all that happening. And I had a false sense of how easy I thought it was going to be. My first year I went out there, my buddy Dan Spano from New York, he ended up shooting a giant the first year we were out there. A little bit of luck involved with that one. And then we're hiking in one day. I look to my left and there's a buck sitting there. I climb up behind him. I'm on top of him, just like the picture perfect. I hit him, followed his blood trail for like a whole day, 24 hours, couldn't find him. Just never found him. A blizzard moved in and we couldn't find him. And so I thought, oh, well, that's no problem. I'll just try next year. And I went in and did the same thing next year. Strike one, strike two, strike three, strike 4 years in a row, just absolutely looking like a fool out there. But then you start to pick up tips. You talk to people, you start doing your research. I did the same thing. I listened to podcasts with about mule deer hunters. I talked with mule deer hunters about how they approach it and what they do, tips and tricks and things like that. And you learn, and then you apply it to how you approach it. And it just worked out, man. It just worked out for me. So I was pretty happy with that. And then Kansas was, I don't want to say it was a guided hunt, but it was a low pressure hunt because I was hunting on a piece of property that my uncle kind of already had set up. And so the only thing I really had to do was set up a couple, there was times where I would set up a couple tree stands. I'd set up a saddle, hanging from my saddle. And, I was in the right spot at the right time. And really what it is finding the terrain. If I was to learn a lesson on my success, it was that the wind was not right on a certain morning. And I wanted to get in there on that morning. And the wind was not right for it. And the guy, one of my uncle's buddies, he's on a 4-wheeler and he dropped me off at this other stand. And I was like, I thought we were going to go back here. And he's like, I don't know if that wind's right. And I go, oh, it's all right. And I'll just go to this other stand then. And I didn't see anything. So I was like, oh, dang, I wonder what would have came through. But the wind shifted for that afternoon. And I came in there and I shot my buck that afternoon. So who would have known what the wind would have done? Maybe it would have spooked that buck blowing too much into this bedding area. It shifted out of the north, and then he came on high ground, I was below. It was the trail he walked in on was north of me. So I had the wind in my favor, perfect shot. He had no clue I was there. And it was just a scenario where if I would have went in, I could have blown this buck out. Right. And so there's a lot of things that happened that were based off luck, but then a lot of it just is like 20 years plus of hunting experience kind of guided me in the right direction as well.
Sure. And I've always gone by like this saying, like luck is great. And, everyone has a little bit of luck, but preparation puts luck in your favor.
Right.
Right. So if you're, like you guys made the decision to not go into that stand in the morning, and who knows, like you said, who knows what could have happened, but because you didn't try to force it, and you knew like these deer aren't all that pressured, no big deal. Gave it the afternoon, the morning, and then slipped in there. Um, where when you were over there with your mule deer, I can only picture how difficult that is to just see like a sea of like golden brown,
Yes.
and then just having to find golden brown antlers sticking up. Like, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen those pictures, those videos on Instagram, and it's like, can you count the number of deer? And the guy takes a shot and it's like 30 of them stood up, and I'm like,
Yeah,
dude,
right.
I counted four. You know?
Right. Yeah. There's definitely times where I felt like they just materialized out of nothing. Right. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
where are these deer? I can remember a time I'm sitting on a knob and I'm just picking apart all of this terrain in front of me. And I sit down and I'm there for hours. And then the sun's starting to sink a little bit, and it, shadows are, and then I see them, one popped up like 100 yards in front of me, and my thermal switched that they were coming uphill, and then I'm like, oh God, he stood up, and then the wind was in my face, and then the sun went down behind me, and the thermal switched, and I just felt this little cool gust on the back of my neck that ended up going right down towards him, and his head went whoop. Later, dude. So I mean, it's definitely, I don't know, just it can humble you going into a new environment. Like the next time I go elk hunting, man, I'm going to get humbled there too, because that's a whole different environment to hunt. I mean, whitetail out west. I don't know if you've ever been in a state like South Dakota or Nebraska, the western parts where it's wide open. Man, the deer are so jumpy out west. It's not even funny. A car pulls up 300 yards away and they're just rolling. I mean, certain parts of the Midwest and the East Coast, dude, they're not even picking their heads up when a truck rolls by, right? And so
they know exactly what you are. They hear it, they're gone, because I'm sure they've sat around before and either got hit or another Bobby Joe didn't never made it home for dinner or whatever the deal was. So I'm about to get into turkey hunting for the first time. I've never put a turkey call in my mouth. I've never shot at a turkey. I've stalked on them a couple times when I lived in New Hampshire, but I'm really excited for that this year. Luckily, I have some friends who are willing to do some calling for me. Otherwise, I'd just be going in the woods and wasting my time, I feel like, but it's like, it could be overwhelming. I've spent so much time trying to figure out deer, and now it's like, I haven't quite figured that out yet. And now I'm going to go try to figure something completely different out. It's like, I don't know. I'm sure I'm going to get humbled,
Yeah.
Have you ever hunted over a dog before, like a bird dog?
Yes, for pheasants,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Now, what you're saying about these deer, the thermal switch, and all of a sudden their head just turns. It's like I got a great feel of that by training my bird dog. Hunter just turned 11 yesterday. He's a GSP, and I used to run him in like hunting competitions when I was in college. Instead of going to like hang out at the bars and do like the frat thing, my frat was like hanging out with a bunch of bird dog trainers and training bird dogs. But man, they could be running full tilt, like full bore through the woods, and the second they smell that bird, they stop on a dime, turn, boom. It's just incredible how quickly, never mind how sensitive their noses are, but how quickly they're able to, their brains are able to figure out what they're smelling. You know what I mean? Like they're able to react to it literally like in a fraction of a second. So I can only imagine what a deer is.
Yeah, have you ever seen that from a tree stand? Like a buck. I always use a big buck, like a big buck during maybe the pre-rut, and he's just lumbering through, or maybe it's November. He's lumbering through the timber. Dude, he's not worried about anything. He's got everything in his favor. He walks in and he hits your scent cone, and it's a big whiff of you, and he just goes, Dad, and he freezes. Like it's like someone hits a pause button on him, and then he's just like, and then they just run, because the potency of your scent is so strong that it freezes them. And obviously that's a reaction that they get at 10 yards, but then they're doing something similar to that at 100 yards as well. So I mean, they're not dumb.
And those are the ones you usually don't know. You usually don't know about those. The ones that are happening 100, 150 out, especially if you're hunting places that have decent cover, you'll never know.
Right. Absolutely.
So the main thing we wanted to get into today was some habitat work. I know you've been talking on some of your podcasts that you have, and I have this specific spot in my head that you've mentioned a couple times where there's like this drainage ditch or a cutout or a ravine of some sort that comes down, and you wanted to do some type of structural work at the top end and some kind of structural work at the bottom end, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Sort of, sort of.
Okay.
Okay. Here's what I want to preface this conversation by saying this. I have done zero habitat work before. Okay. The only thing that I've ever done outside of, like maybe trimming a couple shooting lanes, right,
Mm-hmm.
is I've planted a food plot one time and I overseeded it and it came up, but it never grew bulbs. It was a brassica plot. It never grew bulbs. The deer never ate out of it, and it just kind of became a nothing. They came and sniffed around in it, and then my buddy sold the farm, so who knows what would have happened after that. But this was the first year that I have ever taken a chainsaw into the woods with the mindset of I'm going to try to improve the habitat for wildlife. And here is my thought process on this. Let me first describe the property to you, okay? And so there, I have access to about 240 acres on this particular piece. Actually, it's more now. Then he picked up another 80 acres, so that's 320 acres. It's all kind of right there. But I'm gonna say
Is it all together or is it parceled out?
it's kind of all together. There is a
Okay.
piece across the road that's all ag, but I would say out of that 320 acres, we're sitting at about, I want to say 80 acres is not in timber, or excuse me, is 80 acres is not agriculture. All the rest of it, I mean, it's majority agriculture. About 80 acres of it, out of that 80, we're sitting at another 60, maybe 70. I want to say 60 acres of all CRP grass that is baled or baled every summer, multiple times, depending on how often. So the grass is low, right? What this 80 acres is it's an old cattle pasture that has grown up all over the years. They've pulled cattle out of it, and now there's nothing, right? It's just grass that's mowed. There's a pond in there with some trees that have been planted. As almost like around this pond, for some reason, all these oak trees have been planted. Almost like some guy was there, goes, I see what I need to do, and that's plant acorn trees. And that guy's no longer around, and so and they're fairly young, so I'm guessing in another 15 years they might start dropping acorns, right? With that said, there's a creek that runs north-south on the west side of this 80 acres, and the 80 acres is basically a rectangle that runs, it's north-south. And on the west side of this is old locust trees with thorns, Osage orange trees. There's a couple of maples in there. There's a couple of other like maybe some ash tree, maybe some elm, things like that. Nothing, there's not any oak trees over there or any big mass producing trees really. There's a couple, maybe there's a walnut tree or two in there, but it's nothing crazy. Most of it is Osage orange and locust, right? So those trees don't necessarily have much of a value other than like fence posts or things like that. Yeah. So you can stand in that timber, especially now when all the vegetation is off, and you can see straight through it, almost from fence line to fence line.
Mm-hmm.
And so this time of year, there's not a ton of cover in there for them, especially during the winter months. I mean, they might be able to, nestle up into a dead tree that's in there somewhere or against a bigger tree, or maybe a lower covering Osage orange tree that it splits at the bottom and kind of goes out, but very rare. All right. So I say to myself when I'm in there, I'm like, Jesus, there's nothing here. There's no stem count closer to the ground. Everything is grazed from about 6 foot up, and you can see it. And this creek comes in and out, kind of meanders through this property. And when it turns into the high side, it creates a steep bank. And what that does is that steep bank forces all these deer to the west, and it creates a pinch point between the fence line, which is connected on the other side of the fence, is another ag field on a different farm. And you've created this cover that now narrows down from, I would say, 100 yards to about 40 yards. And so now you have all these little pinch points that come up. There's about 3 of them on this little crick system that runs in this cover, but it's still wide open in there. So here is my thought process for this particular farm. I am thinking that I want a hallway, like a classroom hallway, like in a school. And out of these hallways are these rooms, and that would kind of be a metaphor for a bedding area. And so my goal, first thing I had to do is I had to call the landowner. This is a permission piece, and I'm just like, hey, it's pretty dead in there. Here's what could happen if I chop some trees down, hinge cut some trees. I'm bringing stem count lower to the ground. I'm also letting sunlight hit the floor. That's going to grow up, potential for more cover to be grown in there. Turkeys, songbirds, pheasants, potentially, rabbits, whatever the case is. And of course, my whole, idea behind this is for whitetails. Mm-hmm. And so he said, yeah, how many trees are you thinking about cutting? I go, I don't think this is a 1-year project. I think this is I go in there and I cut a couple trees down every, I focus on these little pockets to create these little rooms. And I'm not talking about a bedding area where like 10 deer can come in and bed. I'm talking about falling some trees, stacking some trees on top of each other, and getting to a point where maybe another deer or another buck might nestle up in this area where they previously wouldn't. So I'm creating bedding areas for maybe 1 or 2 deer, if this makes sense. Now, I am not a habitat manager. I have no background or experience in this. All I'm doing is running with an idea that I've created in my head, right? And so even if I screw up, I'm thinking to myself, well, you've cut down a tree that has no value. You're getting sunlight into the forest floor, and now you're creating bedding and potential cover for not just deer, but all wildlife. And so that, to me, I've talked myself into that being a win, right? So a couple weekends ago, I went shed hunting with my son, and after we got done shed hunting, I took a chainsaw down and I cut down about 20 Osage orange and locust trees combined. And none of them were big. The biggest tree that I cut down was probably the size of a softball, and
probably safer that way.
Yeah, exactly. I've never cut down trees. Like, I've cut down trees before, but I've always had someone there to help me, help fall it and things like that. And my son was there. I made him back away. I had a chainsaw, and some of the hinge cuts worked. Like, I had a good hinge cut on them, and they fell over, and I hope they are able to, fall over and create the leaves still grow for another season. And then some I messed up, and I just cut the tree down and I made sure it hit the ground. Right.
Sure.
And so was it sloppy? Absolutely. But did I make a mess? Yes. But did I accomplish the goal to create more cover in this area? I think I did. So that's the whole. Now next year, I'm going to do another 20 trees. And the next year, I'm going to do another 20 trees. And my goal is to create this really, really concentrated thickness that we all want on a farm, to where deer can come in and feel safe and have cover. And because there's food all over. There's food all over on the neighboring farms, on the farms that I have, agriculture. I know there's certain trees that have acorns on them, like in the south part, there's a little finger that has some acorn trees in them, but most of it's just overgrown pasture. And I wanted to do something to keep the deer comfortable on the farm, so they just don't leave and go somewhere else when all the vegetation comes off.
Dude, there's so much to touch on, all that stuff you just said. First off, my property is very, very similar to yours, where we have decent cover in the summer. The deer like to summer over on our property. And then as the apples start falling and there's no apples left and the cover starts to dissipate, the deer are gone. Yep. Like, I'm lucky if I get 1 day worth of pictures a month at this point, like right now. There's snow everywhere. It's kind of crazy. But I got a funny story for you. My brother and so my parents bought this property 4 years ago, give or take now.
Okay.
And we kind of went in there gung-ho first year. Like, we were ready to go. My dad bought a couple chainsaws, a couple Kubotas, like we were out there doing some work. So I'm standing on top of the Kubota, cutting down this tree, like trying to help my brother move this tree around. And as we're cutting down trees, this younger 7 just comes out and just kind of staring at us. And we're sitting there yelling at each other. I mean, we're Italian, you know. We don't know how to talk. We just yell at each other.
Hey,
you know, yeah. Hey, what are you doing?
you know, so,
exactly. You know, so I'm standing on top of the Kubota. I'm yelling at him. He's yelling at me, and this deer's just staring at us. And he kind of just walks into the thicket, walks out the other side of the thicket, and just goes on with his life. Now, my brother goes to cut this tree down. I'm in the Kubota. I get stuck. The fucking tree starts falling right on top of me. Dude, I shit you not. I threw the freaking thing in reverse. I moved out of the way as fast as I could. I slammed into another tree. The tree fell like 6 feet in front of me and like landed in front of the Kubota. And I was like, oh my God, dude, we're going to kill ourselves before we even get a chance to enjoy this place.
Yeah, I will say this. I had one, when I was cutting, I had one oh shit moment where there was another tree that was kind of entangled with it growing. And when I went to go push it, it got caught in the tree, another tree. And instead of going down, it went like this, where, and then it knocked the chainsaw back, kind of like, it didn't come towards me, but just like
right,
swinging a baseball bat in reverse kind of deal.
Yeah,
and it hit my chainsaw and it came back. I didn't have my finger on the trigger or anything, but still, right? These trees will, if you're good at what you do, the trees will fall where you want them to. But I'm not I wasn't experienced enough to know, hey, this one might kick back after it falls a little bit because another tree is almost pulling it back into itself. So just a learning experience from that. And then wishing I had another piece of equipment like a hook or a pull saw to get in there and kind of hook it up and then pull it down. So it would just be on the ground and not kind of guess that, guess where it was going to fall in a couple months.
One of the more experienced guys, and hopefully one of these days I'll get to this level, but they'll go and they'll start to do all their hinges, or they'll make all of their cuts, but they won't actually drop the tree, and they'll keep going in a row, back, and then when they get to that last tree, which is really the first, and they go, okay, timber, and they drop that one tree, and they all just boom like dominoes into one another, and then they all just drop. My biggest fear is cutting a tree when I'm by myself and it like hits and it wants to roll. Because once that tree starts rolling or gravity starts taking a hold of it, it's like, I can't outrun a freaking fallen tree. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I mean, you've seen a tree fall before. Like, it happens like that.
Yeah.
Yep. Now I have, you were describing your property, and back in the day, before I was actually running my podcast, I had started putting some stuff up on YouTube, and I took a screenshot because I figured it would just be easier to show you. But I have kind of a drawing of what the rough final property is going to look like. Now, I've been fortunate enough, to be on your podcast network, and with that have come some opportunities. Luckily, we've recently partnered with Vitalized Seed, which is awesome because Vitalized Seed obviously makes the seed, awesome seed for food plots. But Jared, one of the co-owners, also runs the Habitat podcast, which is also on your network. And we're going to be getting together hopefully sometime soon to kind of roll some stuff out. But I think he's going to join me as part of the planning stage of what I want to do moving forward. To give you a little bit of a backstory, when we bought this property, the old caretaker, who's still in the area, still kind of keeps an eye on the property for us, but he is a logger by trade. So he went into the woods before they were about to sell it, and the old owner said, you know what? Go in there, high grade the whole thing, cut down anything of value, and then we're going to put it on the market. So when we got in there, there's really nothing great about it other than the stock of deer we have. We have like really good deer stock. Like our 3-year-olds are bigger than most of the deer I've seen in Jersey. So if we could just get them to come to our property, stay there, life will be good. Yep. Now, what we decided to do, because all this shit is expensive. Everything that has to do with hunting and land management gets expensive, from the equipment to the spray to the chemicals to the time, So what we decided to do was we decided to enter into a tax program where we make a deal with New York State, and it's like, all right, you guys come in and we're willing to raise our trees so that way you get some lumber out of it in the future, and in return you're going to give us a tax break. So this year, hopefully, we're supposed to have our very first harvest done, which is basically going to be an entire forest reset. If it's not a perfect standing tree or something that we're like, you know what, that's a really good tree for a tree stand, they're cutting it down. And a majority of our forest is soft and hard maple. We have like a pine stand that they must have planted at some point for whatever reason, a little apple orchard, but the rest of the property is pretty much beech, but like shitty beech trees. Like not a single, I haven't seen a single beech nut in the 4.5 years that we've had this property.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the first thing that happens. But through that kind of sets the stage for everything else we're going to have happen.
Yeah.
Out of that 130 acres, I think we're putting, 90 acres into the program, which means we get to control whatever we want to do on the other 40. And it's kind of split up into different areas along the road here. Let me share this here. Those of you that are listening, if you're interested in seeing what I'm about to show, you might want to go to our YouTube video and check this out. They typically post the day after these air. So these air on Thursday. This should be up on Friday. But let me know if you can see. Can you see that picture?
No, not yet. I think you have to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It might, if it doesn't work, I'm not gonna mess around with it for too long, but I should be able to share a screen, and it's not letting me. I think it might have something to do with my security settings and my privacy settings. Anyway, doesn't matter. So our problem is similar to yours. Our property is a rectangle, but it runs more northwest to southeast than it does north to south or east to west. Our property has I want to say a stretch of maybe 500 yards road frontage that is all like our access, and everything else cuts back into the woods. The guy above us, he doesn't live there, but his the old caretaker for our property has permission to hunt there, and he's hunted those woods his entire life. So he knows, even though he can't hunt our property anymore, he kind of knows where to go where those deer come into our property.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation. Basically, I want to do like you were talking about. You were talking about cutting in hallways, and those hallways lead into rooms, which are the bedding areas. I'm about to go one step farther than that. And this is, we're talking 10 years down the road. Mm-hmm. But what I want to do is I want to have them cut out, obviously, trails for us to ride the Kubotas on, like the 2 tracks. But then I have bedding areas, food plots cut out. There's going to be a 6-acre destination plot. And then everything else is going to be like 3/4 of an acre or less. Yeah. So that way it gives me room to add in screening and edge feathering and all that stuff that, you want to keep the deer on your property. But I have this sick, twisted idea in my head. And if this works, I think it's going to be fucking awesome. Every 5 years, we're scheduled to have a harvest done until the woods, the forest turns into kind of what we're looking for. After the first harvest this year, 5 years from now, what I want to do is I want to go to all these bedding areas we put in, and I want to literally clear cut. Well, it's already going to be clear cut, essentially. But I'm going to kill everything that like 1.5 feet wide. And I'm going to give the deer just enough room, clear pathways for them to walk from food to bed, bed to food, food to water, and all these different corridors coming off. And then once the trees around those spots that I killed off start to grow back, I'm going to start hinge cutting them perpendicular to those corridors that I put in. So now I'm giving the deer a route to walk. I'm giving them the security of the hinge cut and all that regen growth coming in, and the opportunity to escape. And then my final little tactic that I want to do is I want to put a bunch of watering holes on those paths, like maybe like 5 feet off of those paths, not like somewhere between the bed and the food plot, or maybe in between 2 different food plots. So that way I never actually have to sit on our food plots, and food is always safe, but I have an opportunity to kind of cut them off on their way in. Now, I haven't heard anyone do something that extensive before. I've definitely heard of people trying to make, travel corridors for deer based on the cover and all that stuff. But I don't know that I've ever actually heard of anyone going in and physically creating deer highways. I'm so excited to see if it works.
Good luck, buddy. I mean, that's a huge process. And I guess after 5 years, when it starts coming true to fruition, that might be something to document at least, or document the whole process over 5 years, and that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, because my thing is, like I told you, my brother's got 2 kids. My daughter's on the way. She's gonna be here any day. And my thing is like that's my goal. Like, yeah, it'd be great if we could shoot deer. And don't get me wrong, I'm gonna try. Hopefully we have some success. But for me now, it's starting to prepare for the next generation. Like we found when we got this property, it was hard to hunt. I want to make sure that by the time they're old enough to hunt, that it's at least in better shape or easier for them to find success. Because we all know, you take a kid out hunting and they find success in their first couple times, they're hooked for life.
Right.
And if they're not, it's not something they were ever going to really enjoy anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, what are you going to do? Now, I wanted to talk to you about a couple different, like herbicide forest management techniques. So I don't know if you know this, but on the side, other than this podcast, I actually have started a forest management business. Okay. In New York State, I'm certified to apply herbicide in the forest. Now, essentially, if you own property in New York, you can have a couple buddies go help you hack and squirt, spray, herbicide, whatever. But if you're a landowner and you want to hire somebody to come in and do the work for you, that person has to have that, like, a specific license. They have to be registered with the state. They have to have insurance, you know? So a lot of these things, I got into this because of the property. Like when we were kids, when you were younger, there was hunting on ESPN and everybody had access to it, right? So it was like Sunday morning would come on, hunting's coming on. My brother and I were sitting there modeling out whatever's happening on the TV. He's sitting on the couch like he's in a blind, and I'm walking across the living room, and so like since I was a kid, I had this dream of managing a property, and now that we have it, it's like this shit is cool as hell.
Yeah.
So with that, I started doing research and seeing what I can do, and there's obviously you can go into the woods and you could use a chainsaw, which is what most people think of when they think of habitat work or whatever. And in your case, it seems like that is a really good method of land management. Right? Like you're looking for places for deer to kind of hang out, but also to kind of redirect them kind of past your stand where you want them to. Yep. You're saying you're cutting the distance from 100 yards to 40 yards, which, that's a makeable shot for a lot of hunters. Outside of hinge cutting, is there any other type of land management work technique that you have any experience with or that you know about?
Well, yeah, I mean, the burning would be the next thing. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like the next part of this process is I got a buddy who he's done this, right? He's done the burning. He's done the getting rid of invasive species and things like that. So I'm only 3 years into this farm. And so I feel like as I get into get more communication with the landowner, I have more build this relationship with him. I believe he'll probably let me do more things that will allow better vegetation. So the other thing that I could step back just a second before I go back into this property. And there was one time, maybe it was 5 years ago now, I think it was maybe 2017 actually, on my main farm that I've been hunting since 2007, the farmer came in and allowed logging in this big chunk of timber. And I was like, oh my God, it's just going to ruin this year because it happened in October. Well, now, 5 years after that, the timber is so much better as far as habitat is concerned. It holds more deer because it was kind of a wide open, mature timber. Logging happened, took out a lot of big, old, mature trees. And sure enough, that it just got thicker in there. And so it's absolutely beautiful in there now. And so not beautiful, but beautiful for a deer hunter and beautiful to look at. It's two different things. So that I want to say that has been a direct impact of how awesome timber management has been on that farm. Now on this farm, I think there's a lot, because it's old cattle pasture, there's just a lot of trees in there that do not need to be there. But it's also the reason the deer are there. So I don't want to go in and be like, I want to get rid of all the locust trees and all the Osage orange trees, because if that was the case, then it would just be gone. The reason that they're in there is the cover. The deer don't know that it's a low value tree. They're just in there because there's cover. So I think the goal then is the next step is to burn it. I feel like getting in there at some point and just burning that entire timber, getting rid of all the old dead trees, getting rid of like multiflower rose, things like that would help dramatically in that type of environment. And then maybe going into some of these wide open spots and start planting a maple tree or plant an oak tree and get something else new in there that is supposed to be there.
Yeah. No, and that all makes sense. And something that might help you out too is, instead of, like we were talking earlier, if you're by yourself, you don't want to cut any trees that are too big, I personally don't like cutting trees down if I'm alone at all. And I'm sure you have the same issues at times. I have a hard time finding help up at the property. It ends up turning into, either me or my brother or the two of us or one of us this weekend, the other one that weekend. Essentially, we're working alone whenever we're working. So what I found I actually really enjoy using is either like a double girdle technique or like a hack and squirt type of thing, where you're saying you don't want to get rid of the cover, but those trees aren't exactly the trees you want there. Well, the nice thing about hack and squirt is if you hack, if you nail that tree, it's going to keep the cover this year. Next year, the tree won't leaf out, but it's still going to have the structure in there from that tree. So that'll die standing while all the stuff underneath is growing. And then when you're ready to burn, you can just go drop those trees that are already dead and then hit them with the fire. And then you're getting the structure, you're getting the regeneration, you're getting the regrowth, and that all starts to work together really well. Yeah. I for one, like maple trees, I'm probably going to hinge them. I know the deer like to eat those maple trees. And you said something earlier just now that we actually had work against us. Like you were saying, when the harvest was done 5 years ago, it was done in October, and you thought it was going to ruin the hunting. Our neighbors had a harvest done, not this past season, the season before, in August, and it drew every single deer into his property because all they were doing was hanging around the treetops. They had the cover from the treetops. They had the food from the treetops. They didn't have to go anywhere. So all these deer that we saw all summer were just gone. And what makes it hard for us, yeah, tell me about it. So like, I watch a lot of like Dr. Grant Woods, a lot of his stuff, very knowledgeable guy. And one of the big things that I've taken from watching him is figure out what everybody has and give the deer something different. So we don't have a single oak tree. There's not one singular oak tree on our entire mountain range. Never mind just our property. They're just not there. So other than these beech trees that should be dropping mast, there's nothing. So similar to what you're saying, part of this plan that we're going to be doing is in every single food plot, I want to put like either a fruit tree or some type of mast producing tree that drops at a different time of the year. So maybe the plot in the Northwest drops in October and the plot in the Southeast drops in November. And then the plot over here drops in December. So they still have the food plots to go to, but then there's that different draw to kind of keep them moving through the property. Right. I want to plant like a chestnut orchard. Like I got all of these ideas and everything. I just sit back and I'm like, man, I'm gonna be doing this shit till I'm dead.
Right. Well, and that's what I can remember watching a commercial one time. Well, it was more of an advertisement or a marketing ploy for, I think, Mossy Oak Gamekeepers or something like that. And it really kind of hit home. And it was this guy in his 80s planting little baby oak trees. He was never going to see acorns off that. Or a guy in his 60s or 70s, they may never see the fruits of their labor when you plant a tree like that. But they know that they're doing it for the greater good, basically. And so there's a lot of that goes into habitat management. I'm sure there's, when it comes to habitat management, there's long-term and there's short-term things that can improve properties. And so I don't necessarily know how long I'll be able to hunt this property. So for me, I'm looking at more of a short-term return on this investment than I am like planting a row of oak trees and thinking like, it's going to do something. Cause I don't know. I'm looking for like more of a short-term return.
Sure. And that makes sense. That's like one of the places where we're a little spoiled is because hopefully this property for us becomes this generational property. Now I'm sure you saw, we had Mitchell Shirk on, I don't know, maybe like a month and a half ago now, 2 months ago. And we were kind of talking about some of the food plotting, ups and downs that we've had throughout the years. And, one of the things that he said was, I hate to break it to you, and I'm probably going to catch some flack for this, but you're not saving the world doing no-till. That's one of the things that he had said. And he's probably right. Yeah. The Midwest has that soil because it's been natural for millions and millions and millions of years. But my thing, and I try to get into it in a little bit of a deeper fashion, where when I go out deer hunting, it's not just a matter of I'm going to a tree and I'm going to kill an animal. It's, that time to just self-reflect. And I have this moment right before I pull the trigger, right before I release an arrow, whatever the case is, where I know this animal's going to stop breathing because of me. And I just have that split second of appreciation and respect for them when I do that. Now, I was going somewhere with that, and I forget where I was going.
How awesome you are at hunting.
Oh yeah, no, I'm terrible. But, yeah, no. Like the future of the property. So my
Right.
thing is like, yeah, I understand that we're not gonna be saving the property or saving the world with no till. But my thing is, can I leave it a little bit better for the next people, whether it's my family or not? You know, and in today's day and age where we're moving so much further away from like the whole Mr. Rogers concept of being a good neighbor, essentially, right? It's like, this is mine, stay the hell away. You go over there. Here's the line in the sand. And if we could just spend a little bit more time just helping each other out, right? I think things would be a hell of a lot easier. We had this conversation, I think, or touched on this a little bit, where it's like, ew, you hunt with a crossbow? How dare you?
Right.
You know what? That might not be something I'm going to do, but if I can help you be successful in the way you want to do it, then everybody wins. Like I don't see the problem.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
to each their own, man. Shout out Mitchell Shirk. Mitchell Shirk and John from Mitchell Shirk, he's the Pennsylvania Woodsman, and then John Teeter from Whitetail Landscapes. I don't know anybody else. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who may be more popular, but I don't know anybody else who dives as deep into habitat management from a detail standpoint than those two guys. Like, you name a guy, I'll tell you somebody better. It's going to be one of those two dudes. So,
I mean, I'm glad you shouted out John, because I actually, at one point, and it's like, it was like in the infancy of me trying to start this company, I actually called him because I had listened to a bunch of his podcasts. It was before you and I ever even met and were talking or whatever. And I was like, hey man, I'm trying to start up a company. Like, you know, would you let me come work with you? And he was like, I don't know about that, but you could come on up to like one of our ceremony, but not ceremony, but when he has the people walk through the woods with him.
Yep.
Like the field days. Yep. You know, but I love listening to his stuff because he's like an architect. When he's putting a property together, it's not just a matter of cut this tree here, plant this food plot there, make this corridor here. Like he's literally breaking earth, moving rocks, creating ridges, creating it. Sometimes it's just like, man, how did you even come up with this?
Yeah, right. Well, and then and then to have the wherewithal to implement it. Because you look at some of these guys, one of the greatest land managers in the state of Iowa, from a whitetail standpoint, is Skip Sly. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with who this guy is, but he owns one of the biggest white farms, continuous farms in Iowa. I think it's like 2,500 acres, maybe a little more. And he is there. I mean, yeah, he makes money off of his CRP programs and cash rents ground, and also there's probably some timber program that he's making money on his farm, and he has some like people run cattle on it. But his main focus, I mean, he's doing a lot of this for whitetails, just to manage whitetails. And he shot some giants, I believe, this year. He shot a 233-inch deer out of that farm.
And deer, that's a monster.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. However, you know, it has to start somewhere to get somewhere else, right? And so you have to have patience, and especially if you're thinking, oh my God, this project would be too big, you know, well, it's not going to happen in 1 year. You're not going to just all of a sudden manage a property and cut down a couple trees and then deer are just going to start showing up that are bigger, right? It's not how that works. So,
and the hardest thing for us is like my parent, my dad, my uncle, they're the old school hunters. Right, the deer you have, a spike is always going to be a spike. Like they're that mentality. They're, well, if I don't shoot it, the neighbor's going to shoot it, kind of thing, you know. And the hardest thing for me has been convincing the guys who are part of just getting it done or the hunting to buy into it. But I finally think I'm starting to make some headway. You know, we haven't really been shooting deer all that much. Like my brother and I, the first year there, we shot 6-pointers the first year there. We pretty much shot the first couple bucks we saw, kind of got that out of our system. In the preceding 3 years, I didn't shoot at a single deer until this year again, where I hit a doe and then shot a doe come rifle season. I didn't want to shoot doe for the longest time. I really didn't. But now we have like a herd of 15 or 20 doe on the 130 acres. Felt like it was time to maybe take one or two. But I passed up some bucks this year that I would have shot in the past. If I'd seen them on public land, I probably would have shot them, or at least taken a shot at them. And it's just different when it's so much easier and a little less nerve-wracking when I can see a deer coming in and immediately say, I'm not going to shoot that one. And I could just bring my camera around and record him instead of, am I, will I shoot him? Will I not shoot him? Should I, shouldn't I? It's nice to go into the woods with a plan and be able to just do it, but it's also frustrating when you lay this whole thing out, you spend all this time doing the work, and then, you get a picture that someone shot, a young buck or, a young doe or whatever the case is. And it's like, man, it's hard sometimes to understand that you didn't really set yourself back as far as you think you did, but like, I'm trying to you see, like when we were talking, like I have this plan so dialed in, or at least I think I do, that it's like, I want everything kind of how I have it planned out. And maybe I need to ease up on that just a little bit. I don't know, man. This is my first time doing it, but, what's your timeline? Because we're at about an hour now. I think we can start wrapping this up here. But what is your timeline as far as your final plan? I know you said your goal is like, I want results ASAP because I don't know if I'm going to have this property in 5 years.
I want the goal. I want the results as soon as possible. But I also know that cutting down 20 small trees isn't going to do anything real much. But over the course of next year, I'm going to move 20 yards up the property. I'm going to cut down another group, and then the next year another little group, and hopefully what I'm creating is these balls of cover in this I'm going to guess about 600 yards of timber, maybe even a little less, maybe 500 yards of timber. That's about 100 yards wide, or excuse me, 500 yards by 100 yards, right? That's the rectangle. And then I don't know, man, it's just I don't even necessarily have a goal. I'm just doing this to see what happens. I got approval, and now I'm just like, let's just see if it works. And maybe when I go through there next year to shed hunt it, or I go in there and in July to take a look at what this little area is, what has grown up from this sunlight, I'm going to be able to say, here's what I need to do next time. Or, hey, this did exactly what I wanted to do. Some grass grew up in here, some whatever. And now I just need to get in there and maybe refine it. Maybe I take some switchgrass in there, and I throw some switchgrass seed or some CRP whatever in there, and wherever the sun hits, maybe this grass grows up now. And it may not be some trees, but it's maybe some warm season grasses for them to come in and nestle up in. And maybe I do that. Maybe I girdle some trees next time. Maybe I don't know. There's so many things. This is just a starting point, but I envision the end goal here is a thicker timber with more cover closer to the ground. That's all I want.
Okay. Now, is this like this specific property? And if the property owner listens to this and you don't want to answer like that's all fine and good. But when it comes to this specific property, it kind of sounds like you're using this as like a, let's test it out and see what happens. Right. But if it works here, is there another property that you have that you're like, I'd rather do it there, but I'm trying to see if it works here first?
Probably not, to be honest with you. The other property that I hunt on that I would love to do some kind of management on, that's more of your standard hardwoods. Like it's more of a natural forest. It's a river bottom farm. There's not as much Osage orange in there. In the fence rows there are up top where the ag fields are, but it's more of a bigger timber scenario with like timbered fingers rolling up into ag fields. And so it's also wide open. But if I was to do anything on that farm, I would probably have them go in and do more timbering of these woods. But the timber is in a forest program right now. And so it's not, I don't think you can timber it for another X amount of years. And then you can get in and then you can timber it and then you can sign back up for the program again.
I gotcha. So it sounds very similar to the program we're in. And the nice thing, because as we go, we're learning a little bit more of the intricacies of the program, what we can do, what we can't do. A beautiful thing is a clear cut is almost always acceptable in this tax program because it's considered a reset. So if there's places that we want, like, okay, you know what? We need a bedding area here. I can go and clear cut an entire 2-3 acres and not have to worry about it because it all falls under the scope of improving. Now, what I do need to do is focus on the trees they want. So like they're going to want the cherry trees. They're going to want the hard maples. They're going to want some of the pine trees if it's the right pine trees growing, So we do have our hands handcuffed in that sense a little bit. But other than that, I mean, we have free range. And I'm gonna leave you with this because I think this could help you in like you're looking for results as fast as possible. If you're going in the woods with a chainsaw, bring a little backpack with you, throw a little bladder in there, so you have some water for the day, and have a hatchet and a bottle of mixture of spray. And the bigger trees, and you're like, man, I really wish I could drop this, but it's too big for me to hinge. Man, just every 3 inches around the tree, hit it with the hatchet, spray that formula in there, and you're going to end up being able to take care of so many more trees in a year because you're not sitting there with the chainsaw every time.
Right.
I remember last year I worked with this gentleman in PA. We were, he hired me to do some work with him, and we cleared 50 acres, I think, in 3 days between 2 or 3 of us. You know what I mean? So that hack and squirt is a phenomenal method to use, especially if it's like a lesser desired species. Like I don't care about like I'd rather hinge cut the maples and hack and squirt the beech trees whenever they come because they're not really going to get what they need from that.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So is there anything else that we haven't touched on? Anything you want to share before we start to before I wrap this up here?
Not really, man. Like I said, I'm just beginning this journey into, I don't even want to call it habitat management, because I'm not necessarily managing anything. I'm just going in there and chopping some trees down and hoping nature takes its course, really.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really cool because I like to think of it from the natural standpoint. It's like we're trying to do what we've asked Mother Nature to stop doing.
Yeah.
Right. Like we don't want tornadoes to come through. We're going to go and knock trees down. We don't want fire. We don't want a wild forest fire. We'll go in there and put the fire in ourselves.
Yep.
So. Dan, I want to thank you so much for joining us here.
Oh,
today,
absolutely.
This was a great time. I enjoyed it. If there's anyone who's living under a rock and doesn't quite know who you are at this point, can you just give them a quick plug where they can find you?
Okay, so I would start off at onlyfans.com/ I'm just kidding.
Onlybucks.
Onlybucks.com. Onlyfingers.com. No, just go. This is what I tell everybody. Like, I'm not really into a ton of self-promotion. I'd rather promote you guys. And so I would say go to the sportsmansempire.com, and that's SPORTSMENS empire.com. And there you will find a collection of, in my opinion, some of the best outdoor themed podcasts, period. And I'll put that, and I'm biased, but I'll put that content up against anybody else's podcast that's out there, whether they're on the network or not. And so, I mean, you guys, you cover a specific region. We got, like John and his Habitat podcast, man, that is second to nobody. And then we got guys like the Western Rookie out there. Like if you're thinking about going out on a Western hunt, that's a must listen. And then we got like, some coon hunting stuff. We got like Wisconsin, and we got individual states and things like that. The mid-Atlantic region as well. We got that covered. And so, just a ton of great content coming out of the network on a daily basis. And if you're a serious outdoorsman, or you just want some content to, bide the time, then we got it for you.
Absolutely. And, first off, thank you for the plug from all of us.
Yeah.
And if he's not going to promote himself, I'll go ahead and do it for him real quick. Dan, he has his own, you have your own clothing company, your own line of clothing.
Oh, full sneak gear.
And he has just released, what is it? Gobble, gobble, boom.
The turkey tee. Yeah. The turkey hunting t-shirt. Yep.
Yeah. I saw that turkey tee come out. It's like, it's clean. It's simple, but it's like, boom. I love it.
It's kind of an inside joke with my stepdad and I believe some other friends of mine, where he's like, what's your strategy to turkey hunt? And I go, get them to gobble again, and then shoot them in the face. So we just like gobble, gobble, boom is what we try to do every spring. So it's out and it's ready to be ordered by you.
There you go. I like that. And and we're going to close it on that, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here for another episode of the Wing and Tail Boys. We love having you. We love having you join us every week, Thursdays, 5 a.m. Eastern Central Time. If you like what you heard today, if you found any value, share it with a buddy. Go on to the bottom, leave a review, hit the like, do whatever you got to do. Helps us out. And until next weekend, remember, success is just a commitment away. Have a great week, ladies and gentlemen. Nope. Hold on a second. I almost left by accident.